My name is Ron Chinzer. I work with the Toronto Police Service. This is where I'm from. This is our 8th gang prevention town hall meeting, so thank you everybody for coming. I know it's extremely tough to come, especially with children, when you're probably exhausted from a full day, especially to show up for something like this. Generally speaking, what we do is we just, at the beginning, we'd like to go around, kind of talk to everybody and figure out what's happening, but every one of these town halls that we've done, we've changed from the last one. The format for today, and before I get to the format, I should give you a heads up. I do record myself for this. It's not for me. What happens is I put clips of this online to social media, and what happens is it gets to a bigger audience for certain communities that don't really have a voice outside of where they are. So for me, because I'm a police officer at the Toronto Police Service, and I put these snippets up online, over the last 2 years, I've generated a following of strategic advisors to different levels of government, different chiefs of police, different members of different various organizations, and I have the luxury of being able to take what's happening here and putting it out on a social media platform where sometimes 12, 13, or 14, or 15,000 people get to see what's happening at a very grassroots level. And that's very important for us. Again, this is not for me. For the format today, I'm going to go through really quickly kind of our vision going forward and really what's happening in the city of Toronto and all over the world when it comes down to gangs and gang violence. And then after that, we shut off the cameras, we shut off the microphone, and we have an open discussion. And in that open discussion, I promise you that whatever you say, we will keep you safe. All right, and we're not looking for you to say, hey, this guy beside me is a drug dealer and he killed 4 people. We can talk about that afterwards if you want to talk about it. Really, what we want to know is what are your actual experiences that you're having every day that people don't know about? One of those experiences that we've come across is, actually I'll save that for later. But before we start this, I want to give you an idea on a bit of a different and a personal level as to really what we're dealing with and what our vision is going forward. And with this, and where this came from was 3 years ago, one of our deputy chiefs of police, and for those of you who don't understand the policing structure, it's cool. I don't understand half of it either. I want you to imagine a company like, give me a company, any company. Walmart, right? Walmart has a CEO, that's our chief of police. And underneath Walmart, there's 4 vice presidents, and each one of those vice presidents is responsible for something different. In our case, we have a chief of police, and our vice presidents are called deputy chiefs. And one of our deputy chiefs is in charge of guns and gangs and our drug squad and all that other cool stuff. And he came down to our office 3 years ago, and he found myself and Detective Kondo, who's my partner over there. And he said, guys, every year for 15 years, we go out, we find gangs, we find gang members, we do our job, and we go out there and we arrest them and we hold them accountable for what they do. But that has done nothing for the actual problem, the problem being gangs. Gangs have in fact increased, gang crime has increased, gang violence has increased. So while we do what we're doing well, we're missing something. So we need to figure out what that looks like. And what we're actually missing was, initially the idea was, how do we get a gang member out of a gang? So Jay and I were tasked with figuring out, how do we do this? How can we figure this out? And when we looked all over the world for something successful that can work to get a gang member out of a gang, we found there's nothing. No place in the world, no level of government, no police agency, no social service has a proven effective way to get a gang member out of a gang. But what we did learn in the process was there are many things you could do from the ages of 0 to 18 to prevent the kid from becoming gang involved in the first place. There's a lot more success in that space. So we decided to really adopt a bigger vision of getting gang members out of gangs to gang prevention being, how do we stop kids from the age of 0 going all the way to the age of 18 from getting in gangs? And that became our primary focus. These town halls, where they came into play was, we'd spent a couple of years exploring spaces with other agencies, other government organizations to say, hey, would you be interested in participating in something like this? Let's share experiences. And what we learned was, as we did that, the one thing that we neglected was to actually touch base with the communities that are most impacted by gangs and gang violence. So we really wanted to hear from the community members firsthand and foremost, what are the actual problems? What are things that you're facing every day? What are some obstacles that you can't overcome or that are very challenging for you? And that's kind of how we got to here. Last week at one of our town halls, and this sums up kind of the bigger vision for this, we were at the front of it, and I had a 75-year-old lady. She came in a wheelchair. And when she came into the front, we were there half an hour early, and she came right to me and she says, hey, Ron, I want to talk to you. I go, okay, well, what do you want to talk about? And she spoke for about 30 minutes. And what she spoke about was, she's told me her life story, right? And this is her story, and it's a terrible one. It's a sad one that's mimicked everywhere. She said when she was 11 or 12, her parents passed away. When she was 13 or 14, she was sexually assaulted and she got pregnant and she had a baby. That baby went on at the age of 15, got pregnant, and had another baby. And now that baby had another baby. So at the age of 75, she's a great-grandmother. And she said, my time is limited, and the only thing I want peace before I pass away. And I asked her, I said, well, what is peace for you, and how does it look, and what can I do to help you out? And she says, I want to get a message to my great-granddaughter that how my life went, how my daughter's life went, how my granddaughter's life went is not how life has to be for you. She says, I want to die in peace. I don't want my life to repeat itself. And that was a beautiful story for us in terms of mimicking really where we want to go. With our strategy that we're going to explain going forward, this is not about something we invest in today and we're going to see a result tomorrow. This is a 10, 15, 20-year strategy that at some point we're going to break a cycle. But for us to break a cycle, first we need to gather what's actually happening as well as explain what we want to do and where we can all fill in the gaps for each other. One of the first questions we got asked again was, how do we get a gang member out of a gang? And as a police agency, one of the first obstacles we had was we had to determine two things very quickly, right? So I'll ask you here, what are the two things that you think would pop up for anybody here when it says to you, how do you get a gang member out of a gang? It's difficult, right? But here are the two things that popped up. Where do we go and who do we look for? All right, like anything else, if they say get a gang member out of a gang, the city of Toronto is huge. It's massive from end to end. It's the only city I know of in Canada where sometimes it takes you an hour to go end to end. Sometimes 3 hours end to end. It's huge, it's massive. We had a lot of places to pick, so we couldn't determine where exactly to go. The second part to this was, well, what does a gang member look like? Who are we actually going after? We can't just randomly go up to random people and say, you're a gang member, we're gonna save your life. It doesn't work that way. So we have to have a real objective lens, being something outside of our personal experience that can push us in the right direction for the right time. The first part was, where do we go? Now, the City of Toronto, over the last 4 or 5 years, and Serena, you might know about this. So Serena is one of the managers with the City of Toronto, who's one of our biggest partners and advocates. The City of Toronto broke down the city into 140 neighborhoods. Is everybody familiar with that? Yeah, you kind of know what neighborhood you belong into? Now, where that came from and how the city got divided was they based it based on something called an equitable score. And that equitable score kind of scored where your neighborhood was, and it was based loosely off of 5 things. What were the economic opportunities within your neighborhood? What did social development look like in here? How much participation did the community members in these neighborhoods have in actual processes and changes happening in that community? How healthy was everybody? Not just physical health, but mental health. And the last one being physical surroundings. What was your access to the rest of the city or to opportunity? And unfortunately, they identified 31 neighborhoods in the City of Toronto as being low equitable neighborhoods, being that they don't meet the threshold or standard for where they should be. The good news is the City of Toronto in 2020 is investing not only millions of dollars, but actual resources into these neighborhoods to get them bolstered, to bring them back up by incorporating your voice in what those solutions look like. Now here's where this gets interesting for us. When we looked at the 31 low equitable neighborhoods called neighborhood improvement areas, we did a bit of a comparison, and the comparison was done on gang mapping. Where do the gangs live? Where do the gangs commit crime? And if I were to take that map and take the low equitable neighborhoods map and I put them over top of each other, guess what? It's almost identical. So now we had a very effective way of finding out where we need to start to have these conversations. Where are the communities that are most impacted by gangs, gang violence, as well as gang recruitment and victimization? Now the second part of it was, what does a gang member look like and who joins gangs? So I'll ask you here in this room, and here's the interest of this, all right? And I want to keep this theme going forward. And we've done this in every town hall, and we've got amazing feedback and insight. And the interest of that and how we do that is, I want everybody to feel as comfortable as you are in saying how you actually feel. If you feel a certain way because you have an experience, that experience is 100% true to you, 1,000,000%, and there's nothing wrong with that, but we have to be respectful of each other and respectful of those experiences. But if you have an experience, don't deter that from being able to speak freely and openly. We need to first get out what we think or what we've experienced to then determine what's actually true. Can your experiences lie to you? 100% they can, right? It's not your fault, it's just we need to have a conversation about it. And sometimes your experiences are right. So I'll ask you in this room, if we were to find a gang member, what would they look like? So I know what area to go to, but now I actually have to find somebody. And here's the best example I'll give you. Imagine I go into my pocket and I pull it out and it's this pill. It's a magic pill. And this pill, if I give it to a kid or adult who's gang involved, not only will they change their life, but they will come back to the community. They won't be gang involved. They're going to create economic opportunities. They're going to create a business here that's going to employ hundreds of people, and they're going to be the marker for success. And there's going to be a statue right here about that person and say, this person changed their life and they changed their community. But I got an hour and I got to find this kid. I got to give him this pill, and I need your help. We're here to change lives. We're here to save kids. We're here to stop gangs. We're here to create opportunities for some kids who might not even see it. So what does this person look? Let's go with the sex. Is it a boy or a girl? I got an hour. A boy? Somebody said a boy. Are we all okay with a boy? It's uncomfortable. It's going to get more uncomfortable. It's okay. It's part of the game. Okay, so we got a boy. Now, what age is this boy? We're going to change your life. Teen years? Let's give rough teen years. Like, what does a rough teen years look like? Early teens, 15? So 15-year-old boy. What about clothing? What kind of clothes do they wear? Well, that's great. What neighborhood are we going to go into? Before we finish up the clothing description, what neighborhood are we going into? Give me a neighborhood. Sorry, Flemingdon? Is everybody okay with Flemingdon? So Flemingdon, boy, yes, sir.
Oh, yes, Flemingdon also has Thorncliffe Park.
Okay, Thorncliffe Park or Flemingdon, all right?
Yes.
So let's pick one of those. Are we good with Flemingdon or Thorncliffe? Flemingdon? Okay, we're going to say, but I like Thorncliffe. Thorncliffe's very good. Thank you for giving that. All right, so we're in Flemingdon, 15-year-old boy. What does his clothes look like? Guys, we have half an hour now. The time is running out. We're going to change a life. I need to know what his clothes look like. Somebody has to tell me. He's wearing a hoodie, right? Something sports related. Hoodie. Does he have like a bandana or jewelry on, or has his hairstyle a certain way? Sports related hat, right? Anybody else want to add to the description of this kid? Guys, we're going to change this kid's life. We got to make sure we get the right one. We got to find a gang kid. We now got 15 minutes. Tattoos. Fantastic. All right, tattoos, good. What about jewelry? Yeah.
And also you can wear the watch.
Yeah, he might be wearing a watch, like a really nice watch. I don't know what the names of them are, but I know really expensive watches.
There's also here, and then you can use, when you go outside or somewhere, you can use a sunscreen.
There you go. Right, so you might have a watch, you might have other stuff with him. Now here's the most uncomfortable part. What skin color is this kid? Mixture. But guys, we have 5 minutes. This pill is going to change a life, and I can't find it. Mixture means a lot. Give me a skin color for a kid. So we're gonna. I know, but I have 3 minutes left, and I need a commitment from somebody to speak about how they feel about what color this kid might be. We're going to change his life. Yes, sir.
Well, I think they're usually in at least 3s or 4s, and there's usually a couple of white ones, and there's a couple of other ones, and vice versa.
A couple.
In every little group of 3 or 4 you see, so it's
Okay, but now listen, guys, we're down to 1 minute. 1 minute, and this is going to change not only his life, everybody else's life, but I need somebody to commit hard to something and be okay in committing to it. Should I say it? Should I say it? Black kid. This is African American. We're just going to say skin color black. Now here's the thing, all right? Here's the thing. So now I go into Flemingdon. I find this kid. He's got the jewelry, he's got the hat, he's got the sports clothing, black kid, 15 years old, and I grab him and I say to this kid, hey, you're 15 and we're going to change your life. You're part of a gang, and I force this pill down his throat. What did I do? How many kids in Flemingdon look like that are not gang involved? Probably 99%. Probably 99%. All right, and that became part of the education piece. All right, it's not what you think it is. And here's the thing. This is a deeper issue, and it's not anybody's individual problem. The issue that we came across with this was, and we still come across it, even in communities that are very heavy represented from the black population, every one of these that we have done, the description has been the exact same. All right, we can't do that. It's not true. And when we conducted our intensive research, not only in Toronto but across the world, race, ethnicity has nothing to do with becoming a gang member at all. What you have in front of you are these gang risk factor cards. I hope you had them. They're also there over there. And where these came from was it came back to finding out who's at risk of becoming a gang member. And while we had an objective way of identifying the neighborhoods that we wanted to get into, we now had an objective way of identifying kids that might become gang involved. This was provided to us from Public Safety Canada. It's from a publication from 2007. It was done from PhDs and academics in the field, and it's been cited worldwide. And what they say is all across the world, there's 36 risk factors over 5 categories. And if you were to imagine a little box beside each one of these, the more of these boxes you tick off, the more likely the person is to become gang involved. So if there's 36 out of 36, it's a pretty good chance the person is going to get involved in gangs. All right, there's a pretty good chance. If there's 15 out of it, there's a pretty good chance. Sometimes people have 30 and they're never gang involved. And that became the solution. Well, what's so different about somebody who had 30 risk factors and isn't gang involved, as opposed to somebody who has 12 and who is gang involved? And those became questions that we really wanted to dive into. And I'll tell you a story. And the story is about a kid that we've had, that we deal with. And this kid paints the picture of this, and this kid paints the pictures of many others that we deal with on a weekly basis that sometimes we lose. And we don't lose them in terms of they die. We lose them in terms of our influence in motivating them to want to change and curb their behavior. So these risk factors, what we end up doing is Jason and myself spent 6 months, and we went and we spoke to 22,000 frontline police officers in the city of Toronto. And we told them, if you come across a kid in your dealings, or a gang member, or somebody you think is gang involved, or somebody you have a positive relationship with, and you can recognize this now, and you can pitch to them the idea, hey, if you want to get out of a gang, let us know. Can you call us and put us in contact with this kid? It's 2,000 frontline officers. Within our first week, we had one officer from a downtown division call us and says, hey, I got the perfect person for you. I spoke to them, they're interested. By the way, they've also just been arrested. So Jason and I end up going to the police station, and we find this kid, and this kid's 15 years old. All right, and there's people here with young children. There's people here that might have had gang impacts, and I'd like to hear from everybody for why they came to this town hall at the discussion period. But as I tell you this story, if there's anything about it that doesn't make sense to you, or you say, no, that's not how it is, by all means, let me know, because I need to know. This education component for us is 2 ways. All right, we do the front end here to say, this is the vision going forward, this is kind of what we know, but the back end is the most important in terms of filling in the blanks for what's actually happening. So this kid, he's 15 years old when we get him, and we go in there and we talk to him. And kids under the age of 18 that we work with, we always include the parents when we know who the kids are. There's a whole portion of kids we deal with that we have no idea who they are. We don't need to know who you are. We can do it all online. So on social media, on Instagram and Twitter, there's a whole bunch of kids that I deal with. I have no idea who they are. I don't need to know who they are. I don't need to know what they're doing. I just need to know if they want help to get them out. So this kid, we speak to him and we speak to his mom, and I'll tell you the story. Now, each of these risk factors, the 36 of them, they're split up into 5 categories. Those 5 categories show themselves at different times. So it's not like they all happen at one age. They happen over different ages. The first risk factor category is the family risk factor category. And the biggest indicator for that is anybody here who's had a 3-year-old or knows a 3-year-old who's an absolute terror or nightmare, hits people, punches people, steals stuff, touches the walls, licks their hands, then touches the walls, sometimes poos on the walls. Does anybody have no kid like that? Yeah, that's a big indicator right there that there might be something else going on. You're laughing as if that's your kid. No. You know. No? Oh, you're lucky. I knew kids like that. So anyways, this kid, in this particular case, this mom and this kid. This kid is the 3rd kid of 5 kids. Single mom, she lives in community housing. She had her 5th kid by the time she was 25. And the mom says, listen, when this kid was 3 years old, I couldn't control him. He was a disaster. And I'll ask you here for the ones with kids, when you're at home and you're washing your dishes and you can hear the kids playing, is everything okay? Yeah, you can hear them. What happens when you don't hear anything?
That's when you worry.
Now something's going on. That's when you put on the war paint, right? You turn everything off. You sneak around the house. You catch him and you say, I got you. Well, that's this kid. So at the age of 3, he realizes very early on, when I do naughty things, mom does what? She gives me attention. And here's the thing, he's 3 years old. It's not like he knows what he's doing. Psychologically, our brains, between the ages of 0 to 7, we operate at what's called a theta wave. And that theta wave is a state of hypnosis. And in that state, what we're doing is we're collecting data. But that data is not for success. It's for what do I need to do to survive in the environment that I'm in. So they're just collecting. So this kid's already collecting that when I do naughty things, people give me attention. He's lost. He's the middle of 5 kids. And then all of a sudden, this kid becomes 6 and off he goes to school. Any teachers here? Yes, teachers. Oh, my fear. I love teachers. Teachers saved my life. That's why I have such a soft spot for teachers. What do you teach? What grades? Middle school. Yourself? Oh, VP. That's the big dog. That's the big dog over there. Do you guys work at the same school?
No, we don't.
No? Oh, man. I might see. So this, I'll ask you this. Middle school teacher, even yourself as a VP, well, have you had a 6-year-old fail kindergarten?
Well, we have kids that struggle to meet
Struggle.
expectations. A lot of them have special needs or And
Yeah.
I know a lot of these folks are also at risk.
So this is the.
And I teach spec ed too.
Oh, you got it, right? So here's the perfect part of it. Right? You have a 3-year-old kid, does naughty things, mom gives attention. Now they're 6 years old, they go to school. And I know it's really hard to fail. You don't want to fail. But there's a big difference in succeeding and passing. Am I correct? Now this kid, he doesn't succeed, he passes. All right, what happens is, who's the replacement for mom in school? Teacher. So this kid already knows the behavior, right? When I do naughty things, mom goes to school. And I remember in kindergarten, there was 2 kids in my class I wanted nothing to do with. They would punch my sandwich. I don't know why. They would just find it in the bag and punch it. I wanted nothing to do with these kids. But those are the same kids. Right now, this kid, what happens, he does these naughty things. The teachers, how many people are in your class? How many kids are in your class?
I have 15.
15 kids. And then yourself, when you were teaching?
Primary classes are capped at 20.
20. So that's a lot of kids to handle. I got 2 kids. I go crazy. I can't imagine 15 for 6 hours a day. And when you have that kid, how much energy and resource comes out of you? A lot, right? It forces your attention on there, and then everybody else kind of gets left over. Well, this kid, same thing happens, goes to school, causes a bit of a problem, gets isolated, or gets put over. And all of a sudden starts to realize again that, hey, when I do naughty things at school and at home, I get this special attention. But they lack social skills. And then all of a sudden, this kid becomes 9, and the biggest indicator is in your peer group. It's starting to do delinquent things, right? Delinquent things. And I want you to think of what delinquent actually means. If 2 9-year-olds are fighting at school and one pushes him and then takes his lunch money and he says something wrong to him and he runs away, what do we call that? Bullying. You know what's that called if you're over the age of 12? It's called robbery. So now you have a 9-year-old who we just say is delinquent in their behavior because they're under a legal age to get charged. They're 9, they're a baby, they don't know anything. We don't want to charge those kids. We don't want nothing to do with that. We don't even want this to happen. But now they're doing delinquent behavior, and I want you to imagine this. That same kid, 3 years old, problem at home, 6 years old, problem at school. 9 years old, finally kind of okay. And mom says, what to the kid? You got so much energy, kid, you got to get out of here. Go dump your energy. And it's Toronto. I could tell you for myself, when I was 9 years old, I was outside, and as long as I came home by the streetlights, I was okay. I wasn't going to get beat up when I got home. But in the city of Toronto now, is it uncommon to see a 9-year-old playing on their own, especially in community housing? It's not uncommon. They're out here everywhere. For myself, my kids can't go 5 feet away from me, right? But there's a lot of kids that are still fitting this profile that mom says, you got energy, go out and dump yourself. So this kid goes out. And now all of a sudden, for the first time, you got a 9-year-old who's outside, never fit in anywhere, and he comes across another 9-year-old, less like him or more like him? Same. And now imagine this. You're that kid. First time in your life. Oh my God. I found not only 1, 4 other kids just like me. They all fire and wire the same way. They all get along. They all participate in the same behavior. Well, something happens with this kid between 9 and 15. And keep in mind, we got to him when he was 15. And what happens with the kid, and this is in speaking to the mother and looking at our police records, is now we start to tell a little bit of a different story as to what happened with this kid. So when he's 8 or 9 years old, his mom, I don't know how she did it, she managed to get him a bicycle. Right, she says, hey, listen, finally you got a group of friends. Finally you're busy. Finally you're out of my hair. I'm going to give you a bike so you can play with your friends. Well, this kid's not in the best neighborhood. So when he goes out with the bicycle, what happens? He leaves it outside, runs into a store, comes out, the bike's gone. All right, so for you parents here who are really struggling every day and trying to make ends meet, and you manage to pull enough money together, get this kid this bike who's been a pain in your butt for 9 years, and then he comes home and he says, Mom, my bike got stolen. What do you say to that kid? And I don't want you to say what you think is appropriate to say here, like I would pat him on the back and say, better luck. What would you actually say to that kid? I know what I would say. You blame him, right? And what would you say in that blaming? Like, give me the words that you'd say, keeping in mind that there's...
Why did you lock it up?
Yeah. You're irresponsible. You have one job.
I'm not,
Do you know how much I did for this? You have no idea. So now this kid, even though he's 9 and he's a bit of a pain in the butt, he's not a monster, he's a baby. Carries terrible guilt with him. They call the police, we show up, and here's the reality to it. There's about 15 billion bikes in the city of Toronto. If you report your bike stolen, unless we come across it by accident, most likely you're not going to get your bike back. There's no integrated bike prevention task force here. All right, it's a bicycle, right? That's how kind of we look at it. Even though it means a lot to her, it's a bicycle. We don't have enough resources to go after it. So what happens is this kid feels terrible. Well, mom feels terrible right after, right? So even though you blast that kid, 2 or 3 days pass and this kid's moping around and we feel bad as parents, right? So then she manages to get this kid another bike a year later, and guess what? Same thing happens. And now she blasts him. They call the police, we show up, we take another report. So now they've had 2 experiences with law enforcement, 2 experiences where something important to them was taken, but we couldn't do our job on the end. So there's now a little trust as to what we can actually do. Now something happens between the ages of 10 and 11. We don't see this kid. All of a sudden, mom calls in when this kid's 11 years old and says he's missing, he hasn't come home. So we go, we talk to the mom. Mom says, oh, he's been hanging out with his friends. They're hanging around the corner. We go there, we find the kid with his friends. And for us, we got to know who his friends are. Because if he's gone missing once, there's a good chance he might go missing again. And we just want to know what friends he's with so we can get some phone numbers. Or next time if he goes missing, we can call up and say, hey, is he at home? So we get to know his friends, put in another police report, bring the kid back. A year later, at the age of 12, he goes missing again. But this time, the officers that are going to find him see that he's been reported missing. And instead of going to the house, on the way there, drive by the corner where this kid hangs out and they find him there. Oh, this is where he hangs out. Grabs him, takes him home, and says, listen, you got to go home. Now, 13, he gets reported missing again. Here's the difference. Can't find him. A week passes. I don't know where this kid is. Mom says, I don't know where this kid is. I've heard from him here and there, but I still don't know where he is. And then he comes home and mom says he's changed. And then at 14 and 15 in our police records, it starts to escalate in his behavior. He goes from robbery to extortion to serious violent offenses with a weapon. And at the point that we got him is the age of 15, where the biggest indicator at 15 is self-admitted gang membership. And that's the stage we got him. So as we go in and we talk to him, he had enough of a relationship with the police officer that he vouched for us to come in. We end up speaking to this kid. We go through all of his risk factors, and literally what we do is we have a sheet and we have a checkbox and we just check all the ones that we think apply. In this case, he filled it out for us. And then when we asked him, we said, well, are you a gang member? And he goes, yeah, I'm a gang member. And he lifts up his shirt and he's got the gang on his other shirt, with the actual gang. Very proud of it. It's on his social media. It's on YouTube. He is a full-fledged, self-admitted gang member. And the natural question for us at the time was, well, how did you get involved? Not knowing what the answer was going to be. We wanted to really have a better understanding. And he says at the age of 12, he says an OG. Anybody here know what an OG is in the gang world? Original gangster, old-time gangster, right? So generally it's people who've been involved in a gang and are established in a community. They're a well-known person in that community. Well, this 12-year-old says an OG recruited me into the gang. He goes through the recruitment process. Found him when he was by himself, gave him a little bit of presents, gave him a bicycle and said, hey, start taking package A to package B, don't look in the bag. And he starts getting rewarded for it financially. Starts getting rewarded for it because they give him a t-shirt, they give him a sense of belonging. How old do you think the OG was when he recruited him into the gang? So this kid's 12, he gets recruited by an OG. How old is the OG? 16, 18, any other guesses?
30.
15, 30? Yeah, he was 16 years old. So by the time we talked to the kid is now 3 years later. He's been involved in that gang for 3 years. Now the 16-year-old who recruited him was 18 or 19, and when we found out who this person was, he was a suspect in a murder. So there's some reality to this, to what's happening. But here's where things get interesting for us. So this kid, we lost him. Doesn't want to talk to us anymore. We lost the ability to influence this kid. Doesn't answer phone calls, doesn't answer anything. And this is where the community comes into play, right? And that's what do you see on the news right now? What are the federal leaders talking about in all these debates? Gun and gang violence, as well as many other things. But what are you going to do about the gun and gang violence? And they say, we're going to do all these things, right? Handgun ban. We're going to, we're going to get tougher on certain things. I got it, cool. There's a place for all of that, but it's not the answer. And what happens is, as this makes the headline, the community says what? Somebody has to do something about it. And who's that somebody? That's the police. And trust us, we take this extremely seriously. This is why we got into this job, was to find people who do bad things. So we take this extremely seriously, but as we're trying to do our job, this problem might have potentially grown outside of a scope of acceptable levels, which is obviously what's happening today. And as that happened, we decided, instead of talking to the kid, we decided to go back to the house and talk to mom. And as we talked to the mom, we made a massive realization. We talked to the mom, we said, listen, we haven't heard from this kid in a while. Do you know what's happened with this kid? The mom says, no, I haven't heard from him either. And we decided, hey, can we talk to you? We come in and we decide on a whim, let's do the risk factors on the mom. Let's see what's happening here in the household. And the mom had more risk factors than that kid. All right, and that made complete sense. I want you to think about this. I use this example because it happens to me on a daily basis. Sometimes I'll get a coffee, all right, something as small as this. And I like cream in my coffee, and sometimes what do they give me? Milk. It ruins my day, all right? My whole day is ruined because I got milk in my coffee because of cream. And I think to myself sometimes, man, my day sucks, can it get any worse? And then I remind myself, I actually got a good day. Then I think about my parents, right? And I want to think about my parents. Anybody here whose parents immigrated from another country? Or any new immigrants to the country? And I think about my parents when they immigrated here. They didn't know a lick of English. Their education was not valued. My parents had no education. My dad didn't. And they just had to grind through. And I go, no, that was a hard life. I got an easy life. And then I look at my own kids and I'm like, they are spoiled. And I complain that they're spoiled. But who's the one spoiling them? This guy, right? But the point of that was it's supposed to get easier. So no, regardless of where you come from, it's supposed to get easier. It got easier for me. And even though this mom had higher risk factors than her kid, it got easier for her in terms of her kid. So believe it or not, even though her kid is gang involved, he has a much easier life than the mom. And what we realized there was there's still 4 other kids in that household. And while we lost influence, who has the ultimate influence in that house? Who is the rock solid pillar in that household? It's the mom. So we realized she had all these issues and she was very open to seeking help. And how we provide her help is we have a mapping application. It's on our website if you go to torontogangprevention.ca. We don't track anything on there. It's open. It's not hosted by the police. It's hosted by GoDaddy and Wix. It's completely separate than us. We have a mapping application, and literally you find your own or you find somebody that you care about, their risk factors, and you can literally click a box and it'll find all the free social services near where you live. So our goal was to connect this mom with as many free social services as possible to where she lives. Not 1, not 2, but as many as we could. That's the goal. And as we did that, we realized that, you know what, there's not as easy as that, right? But it's a great starting point. And that's the purpose of the town halls, is find out where do we actually go. We have 4 pillars on what we're doing, right? So we went over what are we doing in the areas that we're in? What are we looking at in terms of the risk factors for a kid to become gang involved? But the second portion of that is what do we do about it? And we have a model in the United States that we took. It's called the Comprehensive Gang Model. If you go to our website, it's on there. I list everything that we've cited on that website. You can click it and read it for yourself. We don't hide anything. And what that says is, listen, really to combat gang problems, you can't rely on one agency or one group. It doesn't work that way. Look at that kid from 0 to 18 that we just spoke about. How many places has that person come into contact with? How many impact points are there? Schools are a massive one. Schools house these kids every day, right? And schools have intense influence. But can they be beefed up to support these root cause issues? Educators, are you trained in any of this? Do you know how to resolve something like illegal gun ownership? Or how to resolve something like drug addiction? You're educators, that's your framework. But you're still an impacted stakeholder. And for us, we broke it down into 4 pillars. The first one is education, being exactly what we're doing now. Taking what we learned, applying it to the City of Toronto, talking to the community to educate the community as to what we think we're going to go and where we want to go. But the second component of that education piece is hearing back from the community to say, here's the framework, fill in the blanks for how it's going to work here. Because we don't know. I don't know your community as personally as you do. Nobody will ever know that. But we know our end of it, but we don't know your end of it. So we can develop the framework. But unless it works to what works with you, it's almost useless to do it. One of the commonalities we found in all of these town hall meetings, and I was going to save it for later, but I think it's a key point to bring in now, is one of the community members, or many of them, in all of them that we've done, when it came down to social services, what they felt like was that they were never incorporated as to what services they actually need. Instead, the services were just force-fed to them. And if the hours of operation didn't work or was outside the scope of what they needed, the services just left. Right? So to them, they just wanted more ownership and input as to, I need stuff that works for me within my lifestyle. And that's very important to do. So thus, it's really connected on that education piece. Is we don't know that, social agencies don't know that, but unless there's an open forum for that to happen, we're never going to figure it out. So when we do our tail end of this, I want you to know everything you guys say, I gather it together, I protect everybody, but I ensure that it gets shared among our partners. Now, the reason why I put this up here where it says prevention, intervention, and suppression, I already mentioned education, the importance of it. Well, prevention is the piece that we're really focused on right now. How do we stop kids, again, from 0 to 18 from getting into gangs? And that's a component. And that prevention component works really well when you get to the family and school level, between 3 and 6, because they're easily influenced. It's doable, it's manageable. But then intervention happens, right? And intervention is an important aspect that I think a lot of people just skip over. When you go to your doctor and they do your checkup on you, what do they say to you sometimes? Hey, if you don't change your diet, you might get diabetes. Trying to prevent the disease from coming. You have a history of high blood pressure, we have to add in some exercise to prevent high blood pressure medication. What about all the people who actually have it now? And with us, we have tens of thousands of people that are gang involved, either being a gang member, at risk of gang involvement, or they have friends that do gang crimes and they got caught up in it, that sit in this intervention pocket. And out of gang members and normal people, if we were to talk about crime, gang members are 70% more likely to do another crime. So if we just negate this intervention pocket of people between the ages of 9 to 15 to 17 to 18 that are already in the system and just bypass them and go to the 0, we're missing a whole bunch of people that are just filling up the criminal justice system that have no opportunity when they get out. And then we have 18, which is where the suppression end lies into play. And that suppression end is where the police lie. This is what we do. We are starting the conversation in terms of developing a framework because we're the best suited to do it. We already have information sharing protocols. We already have access to gang members and communities. We're the beginning of their entry into the legal justice system. We know the background. So it makes sense for us to start it, but this should not stay with us. This has to be pushed off to somebody else or another organization that is better suited. I'll tell you, one of the biggest issues we have with events like this, depending on what community we're in, is trust. When I go out to schools, I go to events like this, or our team goes out, 90% of my day is trying to build trust, which means that I can't do what I do best, which is the suppression end. You want to know the number one way to combat gang violence across the world? Number one way, evidence-based, proven, it's to arrest gang members. It's to arrest the people doing the shootings. All right, but that's not to say everybody who's a gang member gets arrested. There was a study done in Los Angeles, 300 gang members. When they did the study, and this has been mimicked everywhere else, they realized that only 10% of that gang population was responsible for everyday criminal decision making. The other 90%, or 270 gang members, were in and out of that gang within 2 years. And they all left for personal reasons. Our goal with this is to identify that 90% to help speed them getting out. That's what we want to do. We just want to speed them getting out. We're not going to be able to stop those that are already in it now 100%. But if we can help bump them along a little quicker and get them out quicker, that's great. And once we do that, you know what else we do? We find out who that 10% are. The ones that are trafficking in underage girls in the sex industry. The ones that are purchasing the guns and bringing them over from the United States. The ones that are doing daytime shootings. The ones that are dealing in fentanyl, that are killing drug addicts and drug users. Those people need to be held accountable for what they do out of respect for the victim in the criminal justice system and the communities that we're in. So that's where we lie into play. But our goal with this is to say, hey, we don't even want it to get to that point. This whole operation that we have on the gang prevention side, even though it's part of Guns and Gangs, there's zero intelligence gathering, which means I don't need to know who I'm dealing with. We openly tell the kids that we deal with. If you don't want to tell me your name, don't. We don't need it. We just need to know this. We need to know your risk factors and a rough area that you live so we can connect you from point A to point B. And we need some method of contacting you. Right now I have a whole bunch of kids that message me on Instagram and Twitter, and it's all fake accounts. It's like 1, 2, 3, ABCD. I'm okay with that. I'm good with that. I don't need to know everything about you. What I need to know is where are you, what are the issues you're having, and can I connect you with somebody? And that's where partners like Serena Officer of the City of Toronto, our Toronto Community Housing partners, KMH, a whole bunch of other partners that we're trying to bring together all come into play. And we do it in a way that we protect the people that we're dealing with. I want you to think of this, and this is where the solution lies in. The solution lies into this. Everybody know what this is, a Rubik's Cube? Right, so how do you solve a Rubik's Cube? It's 6 sides. Each side has 9 blocks. Each of those 9 blocks is different colors. And the way you solve this Rubik's Cube is you gotta make it so every side has a solid color on each of its side. And for years, all across the world, what we were doing as police officers, not just here in Toronto, but everywhere, is we would just look at the blue side, and all we cared about was the blue side. So we'd shuffle the Rubik's Cube around, and when the blue side fit, we said, we got it. We figured this problem out. Now, on the other side is schools. And even though our side is blue, the school side's all messed up, and their side is yellow. So schools say, man, we got to deal with this issue, because they're impacted very differently. If you were to define a gang member to police, our definition of gangs is very different than a school's definition. It's very different than a hospital's definition, because we all have different experiences with gangs. But schools would look at their side and they'd do, okay, we got to put the yellow together, we got it together, now our side's screwed up. Now I want you to think about Rubik's Cube, and each one of those sides is a different agency and a different group. And we just don't talk to each other. Instead, we're all trying with good intentions to fix a problem that we see and as we see it, without really having formal change of communication to understand how we're all being impacted by it. And in the center of this is the community. It's you guys and girls. It all starts here and it all fixes here. The Rubik's Cube is still filled with our pillars, right? Its education component is massive. We need to spend time understanding everybody's impacts and what's happening at a school level that we don't know. What's really happening, to be able to support each other and making sure that we all talk to each other so that when we actually make this Rubik's Cube, it actually completes itself. Everything matches up and there's no hiccups. In the process of doing this, we're going to make mistakes. It's part of learning how to do this, but it's totally plausible and doable. The partners that we do consult, there's 2 levels of it, all right? And this is growing every time we look at it. This is growing and it takes a little bit of time. You got to include schools, local service providers, us as police, criminal justice entities, or like the courts, probation and parole, the jails. They're all we're all impacted by it. Anybody here who feels like they're not impacted by gangs at any level? No. Sometimes I come into boardrooms in private companies or different organizations. I say, who here is impacted by gangs? And nobody puts their hand up. I say, who here is not impacted by gangs? And they all put up their hand up. And then I'll say, okay, if you're not impacted by gangs, Do you ever, on your way to work, avoid a certain area because you feel like there's gang violence there? And they put their hand back up. They're impacted. We're all impacted. The point is that's going to take a collective effort. And with this, I'll give you a great example of the purpose of bringing all these groups together on a horizontal level being the city, municipalities, all the services here, as well as a vertical level being municipal, provincial, and federal government. It's more than just money. Money is not going to solve this issue. I promise you that. It's going to take people. It's going to take people that are committed to the cause. In one of our town halls, we had an ex-human trafficking survivor and we had an ex-gang leader. All right? Leader. Now, I'm not talking about a small-time person. We're talking ex-gang leader, ex-human trafficking survivor. And in the conversation, what we had learned was what made them both get into this lifestyle, both become a victim of human trafficking and to become gang involved and do some very violent things was not just the risk factors, but it was really from a family environment. They both were disconnected from their families. Now, what brought them back was family. The sex trafficking survivor had a baby, and that for her was the beginning of a family, so she got out of that, and now she's doing extremely well. And the ex-gang member found somebody, found a girl, fell in love. And he said, this isn't for me anymore. And he left. So families are the absolute core. If somebody were to ask me to sum up gang prevention in one sentence, it would be family strengthening. But for us to do that effectively and efficiently, well, we need to know how we can do this. And we need to know the community champions here that we can build up. We can't do this. 100% we can't do this. I don't have a solution for you today. We have solutions, but that solution has to come from within. That being said, that is my social media. You can contact me there if you want. You follow me on Instagram and Twitter. At this point now, I'm going to take off the microphone. We're going to shut off the cameras. Take 2 minutes, grab a coffee. If you got to use the restroom, get the restroom. We'll come back in 5 minutes. We're going to set the tables, the chairs up in a circle, if I can get some of your help to do it. And we're going to have an open, honest discussion. All I ask in that discussion is we have 2 rules. The first rule is we stay solutions focused. All right, we can talk about some of the issues that we might have seen, but it's not to live there. We have to look to what's going to happen tomorrow and what's going to happen a year from now and 5 years from now. So we should always remind ourselves at the end of every sentence, there's got to be some sort of level of solution addition to this. And the second one is we use I statements. Anybody here been to marriage counseling? Anybody here need to go to marriage counseling? Yeah. So what an I statement is, I'll give you this. It's, look, if my wife, I come home from work today and she says, you didn't clean the garage, you didn't take out the garbage, you didn't change the bulbs, you didn't do that, what do I do right away? I say, whoa, man, you're attacking me. You're attacking me with words, right? Because she's putting it all on me, even though it's probably my fault, probably not. But instead, if she had said when I got home, you know what, when I came home and I saw that the garbage wasn't taken out, the light bulbs weren't changed, the garage wasn't clean, I felt like I had more work to do. It's solutions focused, and we're just changing words because words absolutely matter. So I'll moderate it. It'll be open and honest. I promise I'll protect you in it. And this is where you really get to voice it up and just be open and honest with everybody. So guys, thank you so much. I'll shut it off. Come back in 5 minutes. We'll set this up, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.